This episode is brought to you in part by Exoterra. If you're as passionate about reptiles and amphibians as I am, you know that quality matters. I use Exoterra products on all my reptile and amphibian enclosures, which is why I'm excited to be partnering with them. From naturalistic decor to innovative lighting and enclosures of all sizes, Exoterra has everything you need for your cold-blooded companions. Exoterra. Make your reptiles feel at home. This episode contains a paid sponsorship placement for True Chroma by Faunalux. Lighting reptiles isn't just about brightness or giving UVB, it's about illuminating the world that animals actually thrive in. Introducing True Chroma by Faunalux, a premium, revolutionary LED spotlight purpose-built for animals. Faunalux has worked with lighting experts and biologists to develop something totally new. Reptile Vision Technology, a bespoke single-source chip delivering high levels of visible light and proportional UVA1. That means your animals can get true full-color vision for the first time. Tried and tested by zoos, vets, and passionate keepers worldwide, True Chroma is now available at fauna-lux.com/expertidiot10 for 10% off your order today. True Chroma from Faunalux. Educated by nature. This episode is brought to you in part by Unlimited Exotic Pets. Every day is Veranda Day for Nick Lillis, and it shows. At Unlimited Exotic Pets, Nick produces high-quality monitor lizards with a deep commitment to ethical care practices and top-tier nutrition. These aren't just pets. They're responsibly bred, ethically raised animals. Whether you're looking for a new companion, starting a breeding project, or anything in between, Nick has you covered. Unlimited Exotic Pets, keeping and breeding quality without limitations. Love reptiles? Don't miss this. If you're passionate about reptiles, amphibians, and everything cold-blooded, Reptiles magazine is a must-have. Each issue is packed with expert care tips, stunning photography, and the latest news in the reptile world. Whether you're a seasoned herpetologist or just starting your reptile journey, this magazine has something for you. Subscribe today and stay informed on the best ways to care for your scaly friends. For only $14.99 a year, you can step outside your algorithm and get exposure to things that you wouldn't normally see or learn about. My family reads Reptiles magazine, and you should too. Visit subscribe.reptilesmagazine.com to get started. This is the Expert and the Idiot podcast. If you like the show and you'd like to support us, there's a link to our Patreon in the description below. Some benefits include getting access to new episodes up to a month in advance. There's also links to USARK and USARK Florida. If you're not already a member, please sign up. Enjoy the show. Welcome to episode 73 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm talking to Stephen Richardson of Stephen Richardson Herpetoculture. And man, I'm excited to talk to you because you were actually recommended by a couple of my Patreons, Ish Quinonez and Nisarg. And they really wanted me to get somebody on to talk about some of the Locality boas and all that, and they filled me up on a whole bunch of questions for you. But so what's your background in herps and snakes and everything? What got you into them, and what all do you keep?
Well, this all started when I was a kid. My mom was essentially a botanist, and she used to take me hiking and trying to teach me about the plants in our area. I live in the mountains. There's just stuff everywhere to look at and check out. And she used to being a good mom and giving me the learning experiences. But I was having trouble paying attention because I was wanting to catch the lizards that were running by. And she was just a really cool mom. She taught me how to catch gopher snakes. And she just said, yeah, you just pick them up. You know, there's nothing to be afraid of. They might bite you. No big deal. Kind of a different type of mom. And she would set up aquariums with me, and we'd raise tadpoles into frogs and then let them go. And then I got into horny toads for a while. There used to be a really solid population of horn lizards, coastal horn lizards, behind my grandparents' house. And I would find those occasionally. And she knew that I can only hold on to them for a day or two, and they had to be let go because, being anteaters. And so it was just, I was so fascinated with the horny toads and the lizards and everything, and snakes. And so it just became a regular part of my behavior growing up in the mountains. The sun was up, says, hey, I'm just going to go hiking and find some frogs or find some snakes. And just, it was part of my day. Did it constantly in the spring and summer and into the fall. And, learned a lot from my mom. And then from there, it was just, I didn't really have access to feeders, so I could never keep anything for an extended period of time. So, I'd catch a snake, keep it a couple of days, let it go, and then just that love of being out in the wild and catching snakes just never left me. And over time, I went to school, of course, did an engineering degree and a math degree, and became an educator. And really soon in my marriage, my love for herps was exposed. My wife couldn't believe how much I loved it and how much, I just jumped in and kind of got back into the love of herps that I had when I was growing up. And when my daughter was born, we ended up getting her a pet Kenyan sand boa. And from there, I was like, yeah, this is just really fun. And we started collecting a few more stinks. I had Dumerils boas, and some various king snakes, some pyros, some Nablanci. And I got to the point where, I left out bearded dragons. My wife and I used to breed bearded dragons together while I was teaching. And I basically made enough money with the bearded dragons to buy the snakes I wanted. And then after that, we kind of phased out the dragons, and then just really hit the snakes heavy. But it was my my daughter's experience. I just wanted her to have a positive experience with herps, and she had a pet Kenyan sand boa. We still have that sand boa. The thing is, like, it's got to be coming on 21 years old.
Wow.
Her name is Sandy. That's what my daughter named her. So we still have her. She's a big boa. She's probably my biggest Kenyan sand boa that I have. And going into the rosies, the snake that I wanted to find when I was a kid, herping, was always a rosy boa. They were just harder to find, and I didn't really understand how to find them until I was older. So as a kid, I was always out looking for them, and I knew they were in the canyon where I lived. And somebody had one of the kids had one as a pet, and I held that thing. I'm like, this thing is so incredible. And from that moment, I was obsessed with finding a rosy boa, and I never found one. It took me I didn't find rosy boas here until I was an adult, and I understood more about field herping and how to find them. But in captivity, my wife knew I loved rosy boas growing up, and she bought me, as a surprise present, she bought me a triv, a Mexican rosy boa. It was a San Ignacio locality. And after that, I just went nuts with rosies. I developed a friendship with the legendary Randy Wright. He was one of the big California king snake breeders and rosy boa breeders here in California. And I had access to just all kinds of cool rosies, and I ended up building a pretty big collection of rosies. And then from there, I got into Australian pythons. I had coastal carpet pythons, Walma pythons. Had a little bit of the, when they first were in the hobby, the jaguars. And then I had some jungles, some Iron Jayas, quite a few, actually. I was really into carpets for a long time. I actually kind of was remembering, I'm like, I really miss those things. Those were pretty cool snakes. But, at the same time, I'm like, well, what I don't miss is when I'd open up their enclosure and there'd be this mouth flying out at my face, like, and I feel the breeze, from that. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I know why I don't work with those, but I still deal with that a little bit with some extent with some of my Sonoran boas. But, and then from the carpets, actually, I started getting into the dwarf boas. I picked up a pair of Tarahumara mountain boas from Michael Beach. And when I got those things, they were awesome to begin with, when I saw them, through, I don't forget where I found the ad for those. I guess it was on King Snake. And anyway, they came and I opened them up and I just couldn't believe how beautiful they were. They were just so incredible. And I just got into them and I ended up getting Vin Russo's book, The Complete Boa Constrictor, and then started getting into the dwarfs and ended up buying 2.2 Cocker Key boas from Vin Russo and had those for a long time. And then got into some Sonorans and some Nicaraguans. And as I was phasing out my carpets, I was bringing up the dwarf boas more and having more of those in my collection. And then I had quite a few rosies, quite a few dwarf boas, and then some Cal Kings. I have permits from California to breed the Cal Kings and rosy boas, and the gopher snakes. And then my dad was in an accident. He was killed in an accident. And I was in the situation where my dad did landscaping. I grew up helping him out and just working for him. So essentially my first job was working with my dad. And all these people in my community where I live in the mountains were asking me like, oh no, who's going to take care of us? Or who's going to do our yard when your dad's gone? And so I just took over his business for the clientele that was here in our community. And I was doing that and, being a full-time educator and my herps. And I was spread way too thin and something had to go. And I made the rotten decision of downsizing all my herps.
Oh no.
I look back at that and I go, oh man, what? I got rid of such cool things. Some great rosy boa localities and some of my dwarf boas, my carpets. I did keep a few jungle carpets and I got rid of those. And I really downsized pretty dramatically. But what I held on to were a lot of my rosies and my Tarahumara boas. And so for years, I had a presence in King Snake for a while. And then I just kind of went incognito for many years. And I kept working with the Tarahumaras and some of the rosies. I still had people contact me asking me for babies. And I did a few sales here and there, just nothing big. And I just kept breeding those Tarahumaras. They were like my favorite. And then eventually I realized I need to, focus on the herps more and stop doing landscaping. I'm like, I was telling my wife, I have a master's degree, what am I doing? Why am I doing this landscaping gig? And not spending more time with my herps. So we made the decision together to start getting a little bit larger scale on my boa projects, and look at it as more of part of our retirement program. I look at my mentor, Randy Wright, and, he was a fireman and he did the herps, and he kind of did the same thing I did. He downsized when his kids were younger. But, when he was retired, he had so many herps, I couldn't believe it. And he'd probably have about a 4 to 6 hour a day working on the herps every day.
Wow.
And he was just out there and I'm like, man, I want to be Randy because he had the coolest snakes and that's all he did, and well, he did. Actually, if you know Randy Wright, he would look at part of his house and go, you know what, that needs to be remodeled, or, I need to paint the house, or I need to redo the driveway. He was always doing projects. So he was a great mentor to have. To this day, he's retired, but he still does stuff like that. We visited him where he retired and he's like, yeah, I'm redoing the flooring of the house. Like, oh, okay. So he was just a very hard worker like my dad. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing what he did. I'll probably retire from teaching in about 10 years or so. I'll still do the herps after that.
Do you incorporate herps into your teaching and, like your lessons or your class discussions? Is there a way that you can work that in?
Yeah, I do actually a lot. I did a lot of educational presentations when my kids were growing up. I spent loads of my time on Fridays when my kids were growing up, bringing snakes into their classroom. And it was kind of ridiculous when I look back at it. I wouldn't bring like a couple snakes. I'm like, oh, the kids have to see this. Oh, they have to see this. And so I ended up, bringing in like 20 or 30 snakes. It was ridiculous. But my wife would help me. But the kids would have like a really good understanding of snakes. Because they were seeing boas and pythons and king snakes and, you name it. They were seeing everything. But with my teaching, I actually teach adult students in allied health. And most of my students are respiratory therapists or in diagnostic medical sonography. But I do have a huge group of students that are vet techs.
Oh, wow.
So my vet techs they're the ones that eat it up. They kind of, the day one in class, I introduce myself. I say, yeah, I've been doing this long enough. I tell them I am a professional snake breeder. And I feel like I can say that now. I've been breeding snakes since I was a kid. So, I say, oh, I am a professional snake breeder. It's kind of my side thing in addition to my teaching. I'm like, oh, bring something in. I'm like, okay, you got it. So after that, after day one, we have 9 class meetings. And every class meeting, I bring something in and just teach them something about herps. And I kind of give them the idea that it's a big part of what they're going to be doing eventually, because a lot of people have reptiles. And
yeah, they have to just appreciate that exposure so much, right? Because it's probably hard to get exposure to the exotic pets, I'm assuming, for them.
Yeah, it is. Our program does a pretty good job at doing that. Occasionally we have people coming in from universities and stuff, and they get a chance to see those things. But me being the math and hands-on herp guy, they're like, come up here, just, hold this thing. You're seeing it, you need to hold it. You're not going to appreciate it. It's like when I would meet with the kids, I'd have a whole litter of Kenyans. So I had there's 20 kids in there, and every kid had a Kenyan Sambo in his hand when I was showing them to them, So they were seeing the adults, but holding a baby in their hand, and they're like, it just couldn't get any better than that. And I try to do that with my adult students, get them to hold them. And it's for even for some of the vet techs, it's their first opportunity to ever hold a snake.
How many kids would come back with money and want to buy a Kenyan Sambo?
Well, I never sold any snakes to the kids.
Okay.
It was all education. I think there was one kid one time. I think it was a friend of my daughter's. I think he did ask my daughter if he could buy something from her.
Yeah.
But he ended up catching a rosy boa near his property, so he was set.
Let me. So I kind of want to go back. You said before that that it took you a long time to find your first rosy boa. What was the trick? What was the technique that you were missing and ended up figuring out to find them?
So I'm not going to tell you, it's top secret. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's pretty well known information now with field herping for rosy boas. But basically, when you're because I find usually 6 to 10 a year, field herping. It's still my favorite find. Except I did find a Gila in Arizona. My wife and I took a 6-day trip to Arizona. And the goal there was to find boas from Arizona and a Gila monster and a coral. Those were the 3 things I wanted to find. And we didn't find any boas, but we found the Gila and we found the coral, but the coral had been hit on the road.
Ugh.
Literally like minutes before I found it, because its tail was still wiggling. And if you were there, you would have shed a tear. I was so bummed. My wife was so disappointed too. But it was just a great herping trip, and finding the Gila was fantastic.
Yeah.
And didn't find any boas, but man, I hiked all over the place and did everything I knew to do to find them. And essentially, to find them, you obviously don't want to go out when it's super hot. You want to go out when it's mild temperatures, in the 80s. And the best time, actually, it's interesting because where I live in the springtime, we'll find them in the morning, like 10 o'clock, 10:30, all the way to 11 o'clock. When it's just starting to warm up, early in the spring. But as it gets hotter, we don't find them until the evening, or even late at night sometimes. And there's a spot where my son and I go field herping quite a bit, and probably right about July, we go up there. We have to hike up the mountain to find them, but we go up starting at sundown, and we'll herp a few hours, and we'll find them occasionally. So they do change their behavior in our area. They're coastal rosy boas where we live. In the desert, it's similar. You'll find them moving in the day, sometimes in early spring. But your best bet when you're hiking is probably late afternoon into evening into dark. And I always try to find an afternoon or evening where it seems kind of humid. A little bit of humidity helps. I noticed growing up, I would always find rattlesnakes when we had high humidity up here in the mountains where I live. So the boas tend to have the same sort of behavior. A little extra humidity is nice. The other thing is the location. You essentially, rosy boas don't like sandy areas. And I say that California rosy boas don't like real sandy areas. They like hillsides and chaparral. So rocky hillsides, usually east to south facing hillsides are the best. I say that the last two rosies I found were on north facing slopes, but you'll have a higher probability finding them on the south facing slopes and the eastern slopes.
Okay. Do you do a lot of your herping with your family?
I do. My wife goes with me. My wife went on my Arizona trip. My kids go with me. They grew up doing it, so it's just part of life for them. My middle kid, my oldest son, that kid is just like me. He's nuts. Last year we spent way too much time herping. It was ridiculous. He's into king snakes, so he has a bunch of king snakes in his collection, and he was just obsessed with finding kelp kings in the wild and photographing them. And he's kind of changing his priorities a little bit because he met a girl. And I told him, I said, you know what, you want to watch your numbers. You don't want to have too many snakes because, you might have to get an apartment or something like that. And, when you first get married. Yeah. So he's now kind of working on that kind of stuff. But and he's like, Dad, can I still keep some of my snakes here? I'm like, yeah, that's fine.
He'll come back. They always come back.
Yeah, no, he's not. He's hooked. He's always going to be loving snakes. He's big into colubrids.
Nice.
So his favorites are probably the tricolors, like pyros and the blanci. And we live in tricolor country. There's Sonata here, but we're not allowed to touch them here. We can only photograph them if we find them. They are protected where I'm at. They're hard to find, but we'll usually find 2 or 3 every year. Nice. And essentially the season for finding them is over. It's pretty early in the spring when you want to find those, but it will happen again. Once we get monsoony weather up here in the mountains that comes in from the desert, you'll sometimes find the babies, the smart ones in July and on into August.
What's the legality around collecting rosy boas? Is that something you're allowed to do?
Yeah. In California, if you're going to hunt for a rosy boa, you got to have a fishing license. California, that's how they regulate it. So if you're going to go out field herping, you got to have a fishing license, assuming you're going to touch them. And the bag limit is 2. So if you're out hiking and you find 2, you can legally collect them. But that's also the possession limit. So you can only have 2 in your possession. Now I have the breeder's permit, so I can essentially have as many as I want, but they have to be captive bred. So I do have 2 wild-caught rosy boas from Whitewater Canyon. I had to make a decision, because I can only have 2. And when I was starting getting back into rosies and bringing up my numbers, I just noticed that there was no normal-looking whitewater rosy boas anywhere. I mean, I didn't find anybody that had them. I said, you know what? I'm just going to go collect a pair, and that'll be my 2 wild-caught pair. My 2 rosies that I have that are wild-caught in my possession. And I actually produced F1 babies from them last season. Nice. So the female has the year off. Rosy boas, I only breed them, every other year. Okay. In fact, all live bearers, essentially, anybody who does any kind of breeding realizes if you have live bearers, they breed 1 year and then they get the next year off. That's just the way it should be. It's too hard on them to breed every year.
How many neonates are you looking at in a litter
for rosy boas?
Yeah,
it could be anything from 1 to I think my mentor had a litter one time. I think it was 9.
Oh wow!
Which is a really big litter for rosy boas.
Yeah,
typically they're going to be, I would say probably the mean would be somewhere around 4 or 5.
Okay.
That's your typical litters. And the Baja boas are a little smaller usually. Usually they're 4, 4 or 5, I have one female that's from San Ignacio, and she never got really big. I fed her really well. I didn't raise her from a baby. One of my students gave her to me. But she stayed pretty small. So she only drops 2 or 3. I think her last litter was 3. The 2 litters before that was 2.
How do you get the baby started?
Well, you got to leave them alone for a while and let them do their first shed, and just kind of let them settle into their little enclosure. And then I start off by trying frozen thawed. I can usually get maybe, 20 to 40%, somewhere depending on the locality, started right on frozen thawed. You have to be patient though. It usually takes about 15, 20 minutes to get them to take frozen thawed. And there's this game where you're holding the tongs and you're kind of holding it near their nostrils and they take a whiff, and sometimes you can actually take the feeder and kind of follow the jawline and move it down the side of their body, and it'll sort of agitate them a little bit. And sometimes they'll strike and grab onto it, and the feeding response will kick in. But it's a waning game sometimes. And, after about 15, 20 minutes, I'm like, okay, we'll try this again. And I usually try it a couple times. And then if that doesn't work, I just give them live fuzzies or large pinkies.
Do we know what neonates feed on in the wild? It seems like they would be feeding on little geckos or something like that. Or are they finding small mammals?
I would imagine that they're essentially mostly rodent feeders. I've thought about that when I'm herping in the desert, but the thing of it is when I go hiking at nighttime, there's just rodents everywhere,
Really?
and there's got to be, little rodent nest all over that has pinkies in it, and they just need to find one of those nests. But I don't know, honestly. I think they're pretty much mammal eaters. I don't know if anybody's tried to feed them a gecko and see what happens or anything. I've never done that. I do know that there was an image on social media, I think it was last year, of a really big coastal rosy boa eating a rabbit.
What?
So I was like, really? That's crazy. But coastal rosy boas can get fairly large. I think largest one is in the 40s, like 44 inches, I think was.
That's crazy.
Which is really big for Rosie. I mean, if you kept Rosies and you saw a 44-inch Rosie, you'd go, no way.
Yeah.
But some of those coastals, like some of the ones out in, kind of the Julian, Borrego, Hemet area, that whole area, some of them could get pretty big.
They remind me of like the Antaresia of the boa world, kind of smaller, and they seem to have a big appetite. Like once they get going, I mean, I've seen so many videos of them trying to eat people's hands,
Yeah, they could develop a pretty strong feeding response. And that's an issue that's been kind of important to me because I've been trying to, doing some informal study on trying to get him to stop that feeding response. So, when you hold your, I'll tell you, I end up, either buying back some of my boas or some of my clients give them back to me. And they're just like, oh, it's chewing on my kids' hands all the time. And it's strange thing is there's only, I don't know, I'll give you subjective probability. It's probably like about 30 or 40% end up doing that. Some of them are super chill, and I get clients asking me, oh, give me one that's really, has great temperament. I'm like, I really don't know how it's going to turn out yet. They're too young. But a lot of how you spend your time with them, if you get them out frequently and make sure that they're not hungry when you grab them, keep them fed fairly well and just keep them acclimated to being handled is a big deal. And also kind of like with Kenyan sand boas, give them a little nudge so they know that it's not feeding time.
Yeah.
And I've made a lot of mistakes. When I'm out there in my facility feeding snakes, I'll be feeding like my big boas and, there's the scent of rodents in the air and I'll go, I'm going to go hold some boas, and do stupid things like that. And obviously they're going to chew on your hands, but I have some that are so cool. I mean, I can just reach in and grab them, no problems. And then I have some, I have one, her name is Jezebel. She's a whitewater amelanistic boa. She's psycho. And that's why we named her Jezebel because, the name kind of fit her, but it's kind of an issue with Rosie boas, because they can have a really strong feeding response. And if you're just throwing food at their face, and that's the time you spend with them, it's going to become a routine for them.
Yeah.
So you really got to spend a lot of time with Rosie boas. I think that's the key is spending a lot of time with them, and just keep them acclimated to being handled and, don't handle them when they're really hungry. If your hand smells nice, then they might just chew on it.
Yeah.
And they kind of do this thing where they're smelling your hand and you kind of know it's coming. You can kind of see it. They start to bend their head forward, and then sometimes they just slowly open up, and it's like they're exploring or something, an exploratory bite, like a tiger shark or something. And then they just and then they latch on, and then you're like, oh. So I've been working on this thing where we'll gently pinch the jaw and kind of get them to release. And then it's kind of stupid. You probably saw me doing this. You'd laugh, but I hold their jaw and look at him and say, stop, don't do that. That's not acceptable behavior. If you just hold them and give them a little time out. And I've noticed like, if you do that a couple times, they'll get the idea and they'll stop biting.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of working on that. And if I could, have sort of a methodology that people could follow to stop a nippy Rosie from being that way, I think it'd be great. So it's kind of my thing I'm working on right now.
That's so funny. My spotted python has done that before where I'll just be holding her and all of a sudden it's just like, can I eat this? Is this food? And she'll just like go to bite and then back off and be like, nope. And then a few seconds later, the same thing again, and it's very amusing to watch.
Yeah, and I think they get an idea. I mean, snakes are intelligent, that people don't give them enough credit sometimes. I think the only place that gives them credit is the Bible, wise as a serpent. But, I think if they go through that process where, okay, they were a little disciplining, a little, I guess you'd call it negative reinforcement. You're going to get pinched and stared at if you keep doing this. And it's gentle. You want to be careful, obviously. And then you release and then see what they do next. And I've just noticed 2 or 3 times, and they kind of get the idea. Now the big deal is 2 days later when you go back and pick them up, and do they still want to chomp on you?
Yeah.
And I think my problem is I have way too many rosy boas to really spend that kind of time. So I got to set up a study where I just pick a sample of boas and do like an observational study on them and see if I can collect data. That's something I want to do, actually.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
But I mean, because to me, they're one of the coolest boas there is. I mean, and I probably feel that way because they live where I live, and
yeah,
they're easy to take care of, and they're small, and they're super diverse. I mean, people don't give them as much credit as they deserve when it comes to diversity, and just field herping, you'll find a boa, oh, this is really cool, let it go. And then you go, 3 miles somewhere else in the same mountain range and they look different. And you're like, wow, you look so much different. And that happens across California. We have the unicolors, near the border. And then, the what we used to call the desert rosy boas. A lot of hobbyists still call them desert rosy boas, and then the coastal rosy boas. California reclassified them. I don't know, California. Now, when you look up the species list for California, they used to have it as 2 subspecies. It was Lacranura trivigata gracia for the desert rosy boa and Lacranura trivigata rosafusca for the coastal rosy boa. Now they got rid of the trivigata and the subspecies. It's just Lacranura orcuti. Kind of going back to an older classification or an older taxonomy, but it's just like there's one California rosy boa. It's just orcuti. And a lot of the people that I know that are into rosies and been working with rosies for a long time hate it. They're like, no, it's not appropriate. They feel like that it was definitely warranted to have the 2 different subspecies. I'm actually hoping to get a hold of the research. Hopefully there was some research done to make that designation. But I just haven't been able to find it. I haven't really looked that hard, but I would like to get hold of it and check it out.
I really want to get one from you at some point for my son. He absolutely loves them, and they're just such a cool looking animal. I know that we were just kind of scrolling through your photos on Facebook, and we found one that I think it was like, I might have sent a picture of it to you. It was like gray and like rusty red color. And I mean, I can't remember if its eyes were red or if its eyes were gray, but the contrast was just insane. And, my son, his favorite color is like red, and it was like this beautiful red coloration. And so I'm going to have to get a baby one of those from you at some point.
Probably the picture probably was not true to color.
It was close enough.
Well, I'm thinking it was probably like a whitewater or something like that, or some sort of coastal locality. They can get really pretty blue-gray background colors, and then the maroon coloration in between them can be pretty bold. Sometimes when you photograph it, it gets a little bit more vivid than it actually is on the animal. I was doing a field herping photo. I took some pictures of a rosy boa that we found on the highway. There's a spot that we have to drive up to get to our house, and we just find dead snakes there all the time. It's just there's a lot of crossings there. And my son found a baby rosy boa, and it's just a typical coastal rosy boa from where we live. And I was taking picture of it as the sun was going down, and it just made it glow. And so, with the right lighting, they can look very different. So, but they are amazingly beautiful. And you look at like the El Rosarios, They're like super, super beautiful with that kind of bluish gray background color with a really thick kind of lipstick color striping.
I actually found the picture here. I'll throw it up on the screen.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, there it is. Look at that.
Okay, so that's a Catavina.
That is insane.
Yeah, that's a Mexican locality, and they're kind of known for having that eye color. They're orangey eye colors.
Do you have babies of those?
No, I'm not breeding any Catavinas this season.
Oh no, that's so depressing.
Yeah, I actually acquired a couple new Catavinas to my group last season. But yeah, they're the eye color thing happened in captivity.
Really?
Yeah. The individual that was really kind of responsible for getting Catavina started in the country bred them, quite a few times, and then they ended up popping up with that crazy eye color. The El Rosarios and the Catavinas are very similar looking rosy boas, but the Catavina's got that crazy looking eyes.
Yeah. Well, when you produce some of those, let me know. All right.
Yeah. I have a pretty big group of them. Let's see. Let me think for a second. I think I have 3 females and 5. Sorry, backwards. 3 males and 5 females.
Oh wow. Okay.
And my El Rosario project is almost the same size. But yeah, 2027 is going to be a crazy year for me. As I'm getting back into a lot of the localities I used to have on the rosy boas, I'm raising them all up. And this year is a really slow year for me. I'm only going to have like 9 litters. Last year, I think I had like 17 litters, something like that. And then next year will probably be about 20 litters. But man, 2027 is going to be nuts.
And is that when you're going to produce those?
Most likely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Damn, that's so far away. I'm gonna be more impatient than my son is.
Well,
I know that he's just he absolutely loves them. Anytime we spot a rosy boa at a show or anything, he's just like I mean the color. I mean, for anybody that's listening, bring this up on YouTube and look at that picture because it's just such an incredible looking animal.
Yeah, they're probably one of the prettiest rosy boas, but I have to tell you, like when I find some of these coastal rosy boas, and they're just like bluish gray background, maroon color, and you're just out there in the field, and you just pick this thing up from a rock pile, and you're like, man, this is amazing. There's just nothing better than that. That's probably the prettiest rosy boa there is.
Yeah.
None of the morphs can compare to those things. But
what do you?
Sorry,
go ahead.
Really quickly, I could probably hook you up on the Catavina thing. Just stay in contact with me. So
okay, we'll talk off air. So what is it? What drew you to Locality over morphs? What is it? And just across the board with dwarf boas, rosy boas, are you more drawn to? It seems like you're more drawn to Locality rather than morph.
Well, actually, I live in both worlds, definitely. My new mentor, when Randy retired, I was kind of left as an orphan, and so Randy introduced me to somebody, and he hooked me up with a really cool project, and it's my favorite thing right now with rosies that I'm doing. But there's an old gene. Some of the morph guys in rosy boas don't even accept it because it's so old. They're like, it's just, they think that the hypocabazon rosy boa is just a lighter boa. But it's actually a recessive gene. My mentor, Randy Wright, said, oh yeah, that's recessive. And my breeding trials with him demonstrates that it's a recessive trait. But my new mentor, had the idea of combining the hypocabazon with the the Pioneer Town anery. And so it's a true ghost. There's a lot, the word ghost is used a lot with some of the Mexican localities, like the ghost San Matias and the ghost San Felipe.
Hmm.
But the true ghost is, as we know in herpetoculture, it's an anery and a hypo combined, right? And that's what my favorite project is right now in Rosie's, is that cabazon hypo combined with the anery gene from Pioneer Town. And I've produced 4 in the last 5 years, 4 years, 4 in the last 4 years. I have a big group of double hats.
Nice.
So, you have a 1 in 16 chance of getting both of those things to express together. And when you have litter sizes of 4 or 5, the probability is you'll get less than 1 per litter. So they don't come up very often. So I've kept every single one of them that are produced. I actually have one. You want to check it out?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I figured it might come up.
Oh, heck yeah. I love the show and tell.
Yeah. So this is, I don't know, it's hard to see this, get up to the webcam, but, so.
Oh, wow.
If you know Rosie Boas from California, you can see that this thing is missing something. It's missing obviously a lot of pigment. But the Pioneer Town gives them the blue eyes, the Pioneer Town anery. So they have really pretty blue eyes. And then combine that with a hypo, it just gives them this sort of like, I don't know, kind of a powder lavender color looking Rosie Boa.
Yeah, it's got, for the way it's presenting on the camera, maybe back up a little bit. And so that way, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now you can see more of that blue coloration. Yeah. It's almost like an ivory and, with mixed in sort of darker lavender bluish. It's incredible.
Yeah. So as far as I know, I don't think anybody's accomplished this. I'm pretty active in making posts on the Facebook morphs and localities group. Mm-hmm. They're the best group on Facebook. The guys there that, the moderators are big into the Rosie Boa morphs, and they're on the cutting edge of creating new morphs. Michael Goldberg is part of that group, and he's just got some amazing morphs going with Rosie Boas. But I posted them there, and there's a lot of interest in them. But nice. Nobody has said, "Oh, I've done that," or "I have those." So as far as I know, they're the only 4 in existence that I have. I have a gravid female. I gave everybody the year off this year, but I have one female I didn't breed last season. So she'll probably drop me 4 or 5 babies. So we'll see if I get one again or not.
Nice.
But the cool thing is I have a 25% chance of getting just like either a hypo or an anery.
Okay.
So I usually get a hypo or an anery.
And we gotta switch gears. We gotta talk about Sonorans.
Okay.
Because that's something that Ish really wanted me to talk to you about.
Okay.
Tell me everything I can know about Sonorans. How do you, I'll just let you go.
Sonorans really weren't my thing. The Tarahumara's were, I mentioned earlier that those are the boas that I really couldn't get rid of. I had to keep them. They were just so pretty.
Yeah.
And so I've held back and bred. I think technically it's only the 3rd generation. But I've held back so many of those things, and I've held back the ones that are the prettiest and what I think is the prettiest, and a lot of pink coloration in them. A lot of people like the pink color, and they have this rich pink salmon background color to them, and their pattern is just very busy, and they have the black as babies, it's kind of black arrowhead pattern on their heads.
Yeah. And
it fades usually to more of a brownish tone as they mature. Some of them stay darker. But I didn't realize what I was doing, but over the years of holding them back and keeping the ones that I liked and breeding them, I created a line bred hypo, I guess. So that's a lot of my stock is dedicated to that. And then a lot of people have given me criticism over it. for lightening them up. So I have a dark line too that I'm working on. So I'm just, I got some stock from Michael Beach again that goes back to Vin Russo stuff. And I have a kind of dark-ish Rio Bravo female that I have that I'm going to start producing those darker ones with.
Nice.
So I'll just have like a light line and a dark line. And I love them. I mean, they're just so fascinating. And related to those are Sonorans. I mean, they're both Boa Sigma. The Sonoran Boas are Boa Sigma. The Taramars are Boa Sigma.
Yeah.
They were reclassified in, I think it was 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was 2019. They went from Boa Constrictor Imperator to just Boa Sigma. And I love those smaller type boas and anything that's similar to them. That's how I got into the Sonorans. And I ended up buying I had a few small group, but I sold them many, many years ago. And I just recently got back into them. I bought a whole breeding group from a guy named Justin Messick. And his group is awesome because he was all pure Russo line stuff. So he had some normal het leopards and some leopards. And I really was not a fan of the leopard boa until I bred a litter of them. And they came out like, these are so cool looking, and they were just such a variety. And you get normal looking boas and then you get crazy leopard ones. And it was just really fun. So leopards and Sonorans aren't my favorite, but what I am working on with the Sonorans is getting the normal wild type looking Sonoran. I know it sounds weird, but I'm trying to get rid of the leopard gene in some of my collection. Because finding them without it is tough sometimes,
Yeah.
And so I just, it's a good project. I have quite a few, and I've held back several, like I did with the Taramaras. Of course, all the ones I held back are normals, and just kind of light. And one of the males that I bought from Justin was a super hypo. So he produces some nice looking animals. But I'm really excited about my Tamaulipas boas. And they're kind of, they're not that far as location goes from the Taramara boas. But they're far enough and they were isolated enough that they're not Boa Sigma. They're actually Boa Imperator.
Really?
But they're still a very small boa. They're not considered a true dwarf, but they're small. I honestly, if I pick up my Taramara female and then pick up my Tamaulipas females, and they're so close in size, there's not much difference. But apparently they're not considered a true dwarf. I just had a litter born last night.
Really? Congratulations.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's my first time producing Tamaulipas. I've been raising them up for years. I have some from Glenn's Reptiles. He has a nice group of Tamaulipas. And then I just picked up a bunch that got some from, picked up some that people got them from Vin Russo. So I have a pretty good size. I still have way Taramara boas than anything, but my Tamaulipas, I'm at 2.4 right now.
How big is your Tarahumara group?
Let me think for a second because it's a lot. 4 males and 7 females. Wow. And that's not including a few that I'm hold back from last season. So quite a few. Nice. And I actually, I bought my original pair was from Michael Beach. And then not too long after that, I bought another pair from a man that was very sick with cancer. And he just wanted to, have him go to a good place. And I bought that pair from him, and that's how it all started. And they all come from Gus Renfro stock, from Rio Bravo Reptiles. And so all my stock is Rio Bravo, except I do have one Russo male that I got from Michael Beach that I'm, including in that dark line project.
How do you set up your Boa Sigma?
They're in 4-foot cages. They're 4 by 2 feet by 12 inches. I had to go with 12 inches because originally I wanted to go 15 high. And I was many of my colleagues told me go 15 inches because of cleaning and just kind of getting in there and having access to everything.
Yeah.
But I just had too many of them, and I had to fit more, in the vertical space that I had. So I had to go with 12 inches to fit everybody. But they like a lot of floor space, and they climb a little bit. So I try to keep a climbing branch in there. It's good for them. They do pretty well on a taller vivarium. If I was only, maybe if I set up one in my living room or something like that, I'd probably go with like a 4 by 2 by 2,
Mm-hmm.
And then put some climbing spots in them because I breed them. Everybody's under the belly heat, but I think as a display snake, you can get away with like a basking spot if you're not planning on breeding them.
And what are you looking at for temperature requirements?
The basking spot should be 88 degrees, 89 degrees roughly. That's basically the same temperature I make sure that the females have when they're pregnant. The gravid females sit on the heat almost constantly as long as it's set to 88 to 89 degrees. If it gets a little warmer, they'll go off the heat,
Yeah.
But it's tough sometimes because, if you have the enclosure and then you have the substrate, keeping it a constant temperature is very challenging.
Yeah.
I use herpstat controllers, and even with the controllers and everything, I'm constantly tip gunning things, especially this time of year when I have gravid females. But, ambient temperature can be anything. I mean, the Tarahumara boas can take the cold. If you lose power or something like that, and they drop down in the 60s, it's no big deal.
Nice.
It's not a problem. As long as they're not gravid or something. We had a planned power outage yesterday. And so I was running my generators to keep my gravid females at their 88 degrees. But everybody else, I didn't give them power. There were, just this time of year, my snake facility probably stays in about 80 degrees or so.
Ambient.
Yeah. When you have that many snakes in there with heat cord and heat pads, it's just, you can't go in. I run a swamp cooler to kind of cool things off, but it stays probably about 78 to 80 degrees ambient temperature. And that's actually pretty ideal for the enclosure for your Tarahumaras. But having that basking spot on one side and then a way to get into the cool on the other side. And then a climbing branch and a couple hides. I put a hide on the warm side and my bigger boas, they don't take advantage of the hides as much as I would think. And the hides get so big. I got to a point where I'm like, okay, they're not even using this. They're sitting on top of it,
Yeah.
So I've been taking out the hides lately, but I think as a pet boa, I think they definitely will benefit from a hide.
Yeah.
Ideally, I want to build a playground for my bigger boas, all my Sonorians and stuff. I want to build a spot where there's really tall, really lots of branches, and sliding glass doors, top and bottom. That's how tall I want it. And I want it to be a place where I can say, hey, you know what? You need to get out and stretch your legs, so to speak, and just move them there for, a week and let them just chill, and get out of the 4-foot enclosures for a little while.
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to do that. It's one of my projects I'm going to work on. And I'll just probably rotate my whole collection through it and give them a time in there. I always pick a big snake to get out while I'm working in my snake room. And they usually get into trouble, though. They start climbing stuff and pulling things down. But I just get them out and let them roam around a little bit.
I had my Argentine boa out yesterday while I was doing maintenance, and of course she went into the bucket of like spare branches I have for enclosures,
Yeah.
and she's all woven through it in this
Yep.
big Rubbermaid tub, and it's like, of course you would go in there, you know?
Just got to wait it out.
Yep. It's like, all right, we'll give you another hour. I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
come out. The yeah, that Lisa Benson with Benson Boas, she has like a jungle gym that she bought for off of Amazon for like kids in the middle of her snake room.
Yeah,
And
that's perfect.
so she can just put her animals on that while she's cleaning and doing maintenance and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that is such a, because you always have your hands full, and if you need to take someone out, they get, like you said, they get into trouble, you know?
Yeah.
So how do you get your Boa Sigma started? How do you get the neonates going?
Yeah, it's weird because last year I had really good results. They all ate frozen thawed first. I never bought them live food ever. The year before, I got about 30% of them started on frozen thawed, and I had to go live a couple times, but eventually some of them were stubborn. Some of them took a while, but I always try frozen thawed first just to see how they respond to it. And I usually try a couple times, and then I just say, okay, we'll start out with something live first. But I don't breed rodents for it, so it's for me it's tough to get everybody started with live food. It's not cost effective, and I have thousands of rodents in my freezer, and I can just thaw them out and go for it. And so I really push for frozen thawed for an economical reasons, but sometimes they just won't do it. And there's always a couple. I say always. This year was great, but last season there was a couple that it was probably a couple months before I got them on frozen thawed. But if that's not an issue, they're really easy to get started.
Yeah.
I thought Hog Islands were going to be difficult because I used to have Cocker T-boas that I got from Vin Russo, and those were tough to get started. It was always a challenge. And so I kind of expected my Hog Islands to be the same. And, my last 2 litters, they were all frozen thawed from the get-go. It was awesome. I've heard stories about them being a little challenging, but I've been really lucky.
That's great.
Now, the Tamaulipas, this is the first time I've produced Tamaulipas, so I don't know what that's going to be like. But yeah, I'm just going to go through the same pattern that I do with the Tarahumara's, is start with frozen thaw and see how it goes. I usually wait about anywhere from 10 to 14 days before I try to feed them. 14 days is probably a couple of weeks is good.
So you wait for them to shed, and then 10 to 14 days after that?
No, usually I'll wait about after 14 days after being born.
Okay.
It's probably a little early. Probably what you said is better. Wait till their first shed, and then a couple weeks after that. But I always try to see if somebody's going to eat early. And usually I'll get quite a few of them. Same thing is true with Rosies, like coastal Rosie boas. Man, those things sometimes they'll take frozen thawed, and they're only like 8 to 10 days old.
Really?
You're like, wow, this is cool.
And do you separate the babies after, like, immediately after they're born, or do you leave them together for a while?
I let them go through their first shed together as a group.
Okay.
They have a tendency to kind of just mound up together, and I think there's a benefit to that.
Yeah.
And I just have a nice big water dish, and they'll drink from the water dish and go through their first shed. Usually it's in the name of the tub size. Is it V35 tubs? Something like that. It's a pretty small tub. It's like maybe 6 quarts or something. But they're in there together, and I usually have them on paper towels. And then just like the water dish, I change it like every 24 hours just to keep it clean, because they'll crawl in it. And,
yeah.
But yeah, once they're all done shedding, then I just move them into individual V18 tubs.
Okay.
And they have their own water dish. And for a while, I give them a hide, but they outgrow it pretty quick. Although they're not a fast-growing boa, but the hides that I really have a lot of are really designed for rosy boas. So they're a little bit bigger. Although it's surprising how small some of those dwarf babies can be. Like my Tamaulipas, if someone's used to like, big boas, they look at that and go, man, those are tiny.
Really?
Yeah, I had a client buy a pair of Taramars off me. He couldn't believe how small they were. He was like, man, these are so small. So they are quite a bit smaller, than the.
Do you know about
boas.
like how many grams they are when they come out?
No, I have never really measured that. I probably should this year. I'm going to have a lot to work with. I have 3 litters of Taramars on the way.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
I should probably get a good survey of their weights, or a good sampling of their weights.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can do my Tamaulipas too. I'll probably do that as well.
Why do you think? So, are you breeding both like a dark line and a lighter line of the Tarahimaras? And why do you think you're getting like a pushback about the lighter ones?
Well, some of the comments I've heard is, here's just the thing. I mentioned I live in 2 worlds. I'm in, like, with rosy boas, I definitely have way more locality rosy boas than I do morph rosy boas. But I got some of the weird rosies too. I have Picassos, and then of course I just mentioned the Trucos, and I have I produce Morongo snows, or we call them snow whites. So I have a lot of that stuff, but I still have all the localities too. And unfortunately, that Cabazon hypo that I mentioned, it was lost to the hobby. And that's why a lot of people don't know about it. And I'm trying to bring it back. But unfortunately, they're not going to be 100%, Cabazon. They're going to have Pioneer Town blood in them, because that's how I was able to get mine. And I knew another guy that has some. It was originally produced by Dan Coffey. So, and he's been really hard to get a hold of. I don't know of anybody that has contact with him. But he had it come up in his breeding trials. And, but anyway, I live in both worlds, with rosy boas, but I have to be honest with you, with my Boa Sigma, there's no way I'm going to do anything like that. I could not dream of outcrossing my Tarambaras with some morph boa. It just makes me feel ill thinking about it. And I don't know why. I understand the passion of locality animals, and I get it. I'm a part of that. But I also appreciate what people do with morphs. It's pretty amazing, some of the things you can create. And that's the creative element of herpetoculture, I think. But I'm okay with both, but there's a huge value in the locality animals. What happened, like with those island localities, if you ever seen Crawl Key, that island, it's ridiculously small. The thing is like 6 acres.
No way.
And there's a boa locality from there.
That's bananas.
Yeah, they're tiny. And those islands got hit with a hurricane, and their populations get devastated from something like that. So if they disappear because of that, we have a captive bred collection that are not been messed with.
That's wild. I got to bring that up on a map. That's nuts that it's that small.
Yeah, it's tiny. I think I looked it up this morning because I thought there might be some questions on it, but I actually have Vin's book right here. But I think he said,
I'd love to hear that.
I think it was 6 acres is what he said. So find the picture of the island.
Yeah, that's it's 1.476 miles squared.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a picture of it too. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera, but there's the island.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You look tiny. At that, you're like, wow, if I got stranded there, would there be enough food resources for me? It's they essentially survive off birds there.
Wow.
And they basically follow the migration patterns of the birds, and they'll probably eat as many birds as they can for a few weeks, and then that's it for a year.
Yeah. And it looks like it's very populated too, right? Like there's a lot of human life on there. Like
No. There's I don't see any structures in that picture.
okay.
There's like a camp there for the biological reserve.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah. So nobody can go on the island without special permission, I think. But I mean, if something like that happens, you get a hurricane that just devastates that island, having these
Yeah.
animals in captivity becomes super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then of course, outcrossing, if I want to get some genetic diversity added to my groups, if I try to go out to someone else, oh, well, no, I crossed mine with this, like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't really need that.
Yeah.
So I've seen leopard gene crossed with the Tarahumaras. That's not uncommon. And, and it's fine. They're both Boa Sigma, but I wouldn't dream of adding that to my group.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's like a sacred thing, some of these localities. And if you're not into the locality, then probably don't get into the locality,
Yeah, it's important, I think. I mean, I think it's a real credible side of herpetoculture,
Yeah.
And my son is kind of doing that with his kings, with his, we both kind of are getting into pyros right now, the Arizona Mountain Kings. Mm-hmm. And he's absolutely not interested in anything unless he knows where locality it is, which is smart, and I was on my Arizona trip, I was field herping for them, but I knew I was late in the season. Thought I had a chance, but and I had my permits to collect and everything. And so I was doing a lot of hiking in the forest, and it just didn't find any, as it was late in the season. And I'm not big on flipping stuff. I like finding things on the move. So it just decreases my odds dramatically. But when I got back from my trip, I found somebody that had some pure ones, and I bought a pair.
Why aren't you big into flipping?
Well, I mean, when I've done a little bit of flipping, and when I flip it over, I see the destruction. You break the seal in the grass that's around the rock, and and you put it back, and it's just not the same. And I just feel like sort of an invasion of that snake's hiding place.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to say I've never flipped. I've flipped before, and even this season, I saw rocks that I'm just going to flip that. But overall, when I field herp, I just like to try to find them on the move. Just plan it right so you find them on the move. But with things like pyros and mountain kings, that's tough. You're not going to find that many. But if you know what you're doing and you time it just right, you flip them, you can find a lot.
Yeah.
But again, it's just not. I'm not big on it.
Do you think you'll get into any other Lamprepeltis?
I actually have quite a few cow kings. I probably have about 30 cow kings now.
Shoot, dude.
So I kind of got a locality bug on those a little bit. I actually, my whitewater female's laying eggs right now. I checked on her this morning, and she had about 4 eggs out. So she's working on a couple more eggs. She'll probably do like 6 or 7. But that locality is special to me because when my kids were growing up, when you take people herping, you want them to have fun, and when I take my kids herping, I want them to see snakes and frogs and everything else. So Whitewater Canyon was just a great place. It's not too far from our house, and it's a special place. It's gotten kind of busy in recent times, which is kind of disheartening, but those king snakes there are really special to me. And so I was able to find a captive group I bought from a very reliable source. And he put an adult pair up for sale, and I bought him, and he says, well, I'm going to sell all their babies. No, sorry, it was the reverse. I bought his babies from him, about the whole clutch. So yeah, I'm going to probably put the adults up for sale. So I bought the adults too. So I have a pretty big whitewater group. And then 2 years ago, field herping with my son, we were driving. I was going pretty fast because I didn't expect to see any herps. And it was just kind of in a place just slightly outside of Whitewater Canyon. And I was probably going about 30 miles an hour. And my son and I were headed over to another spot where we like to hike. Because I road cruise a little bit, but man, when I go herping, I go out on foot. I spend most of my time on foot. So we were going to another location, and I'm, just driving, not expecting to see anything. And my son goes, "Kel King," and he was probably about 2/3 of the way into the road, and so I swerved into the sand on the side of the road to miss him, and it scared the bejeebies out of him, and he coiled up, which was great because there was 2 cars going towards me, and if he would have kept going, he would have been squished. So we went ahead and collected him. I had my fishing license, so we were able to collect him. We named him Lucky because if we weren't there, he would have died. He would have been smashed. So I didn't really feel bad about collecting him, and he's my only wild-caught Kel King in my possession. My daughter actually has one, and he actually fathered my clutch from last year.
Oh wow!
But this year I bred the pair that I got from my reliable source. I don't know if he wants me to mention his name, but yeah. So yeah, I'm excited about keeping those going. They're exceptional for the locality. They're the ones that I have are F2, but they're half F1 when I breed Lucky with the female, and I have some holdbacks I'm working with. But I have Merino Del Rey. My Mentor's line of 29 palms. Randy Wright's line of 29 palms. Let me think what I got here. I actually have Mayer, Arizona. And Arizona, they're kind of a cream yellow, real dark black banding Kel King. And I just really love those. They were locality pure, and they were just great looking. Look kind of like some of the coastal localities here in California. And I just thought they were unique. And then I have a Utah locality, and those are really rare. I don't think anybody has what I have. I just call them Washington County. I'm not going to tell anybody where they came from exactly, but so those are exceptionally great looking animals. I'm really loving that project.
What does the quarantine process look like of bringing a wild animal into your collection?
I wouldn't put it with your collection anytime soon. I mean, I would say 6 months to a year, just to be sure. Yeah. Nothing weird's going to happen. My son collected a Kel King, and it was a good thing that it was kept quarantined because it had some major issues.
Really?
Just a long time, So some say 3 months to 6 months, but I think longer is better.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you doing any swabs, or are you putting them on any wormers or anything to treat them for parasites, or do you just do observation?
Mostly observation. I'm actually going to start doing some testing in my Rosy Boa collection, just kind of random testing. I'll probably start that program this year. Actually, it's kind of expensive. It costs to do one animal to do the PCR test. You're looking at $115, $140.
Who is that through?
I think it's called Zoologics.
Okay.
I would actually love to do it myself. If I had the equipment, I'd probably consider doing it myself, but that's something I'm thinking about. Yeah.
And what are you looking for? Are you looking for arenavirus or kind of a panel?
I think the big deal would be crypto.
Yeah.
That would be the biggest one. And then just any kind of parasite that could cause a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the germs scare me.
Yeah, I know it is. It's that's why you want to exercise, very clean husbandry practices. And people say, "Oh, it's not a big deal if you don't pick up their poop," but they can actually shed crypto and be almost rid of it and then reinfest themselves from their own fecal.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, it's definitely staying clean and keeping the poo cleaned up is a good thing. Definitely beneficial.
Absolutely.
And,
well, yeah.
And plus you don't want crap
that
in your bedroom anyway, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And especially, if they crawl through it and, track it around and, so what happened to the one that your son collected?
He's a farm tech, and so he created some treatments for it. He made some compounds for it, and it just was ineffective. And he got so bad that we had to euthanize him. So, and it was a visual parasite. We could see it in the mouth, and it was really strange. We don't know what it was. Our knowledge of those kind of things was not strong enough to ID what it was.
You guys don't have pentastomes out there, do you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But who knows what it was? I don't know.
Yeah, if you want nightmares, look up pentastomes and black racers in Florida, and that'll terrify you. Yeah. It's the invasive lungworm. I guess it came from the Burmese pythons. And
wow.
Now it's in the black racers, and there's images of these lungworms coming out the mouths of snakes, and
oh boy. Is it treatable?
I have no idea. I think it's treatable by not having it in your house.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
I would say if
scary stuff.
If you live in that part of the world, and if you do field herping, just be careful, don't bring that thing in.
Yeah, no, it's if I go out herping, my kids too, my son, if he sees a black racer and he can grab it, he will. And once that happens, it's like, all right, dude, now you got to scrub down and, we're not bringing any of that nonsense in here.
Exactly.
So do you consider like a big attraction to some of these animals, their natural history? Is that something that really draws you into them? Like it seems like you've done a lot of work or research rather on like the Boa Sigma and some of the dwarf localities. Is that something that really draws you into them?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll tell you, the weird thing is the history of these things in captivity has been really interesting to me, especially with the rosy boas. And I've been talking to a lot of individuals that were involved in the history of bringing some of these things into the country. Talk about like some of the Mexican rosy boas. And that fascinates me a lot, but the natural history of these things is fascinating too. Definitely. I mean, it's all interesting, but I mean, you can't get any better than being able to have one in captivity and to be able to breed babies. That's like the best. But yeah, having a knowledge of the natural history, I'm totally willing to nerd it up, it's fascinating. But the history too is fascinating. How some of these things make it into the country. It's like Tarahumara boas. We can trace them back to being brought into the country at Arizona University. I think it was 1990. I think it was 1990. And then they got into the hands of Gus Renfro later on. But the truth is those aren't the only ones that made it into the country. I know for a fact that there are others that were brought into our country illegally. And I'm sure some of those have made it into people's breeding projects, which is fine as long as they're pure,
Yeah.
But I've heard a lot of stories and rumors about some of that stuff being brought into the country, just like the rosy boas, all the Mexican localities and the Baja localities that we have. It was a different time where, some of the herpers would just, hey, let's go to Mexico this weekend, and they catch some snakes and bring them over. And even the Border Patrol knew they had snakes, and it was like not a big deal. We're talking about, 70s, early 80s, and things have changed, but a lot of these things that we have in the hobby today are just dudes out herping and bringing them into the country, not really thinking anything about it. Like it could be like illegal or anything, because it wasn't really back then. Now, of course, it's illegal, but that's all we have. That's why we have all that stuff. So,
are they protected in Mexico?
I don't know the answer to that question. I kind of hope so. It's like, Whitewater Canyon. I really wish that they would put signs on there, slow down, you're going to run into a snake. And I see people flying down that thing like it's a highway. It's just this weird little road that goes to a reserve at the back of the canyon. And just people drive like they're on the freeway there. And it just blows my mind, because, you get a baby leaf nose snake or a baby rosy boa. Those things are really hard to see. And, and even just bigger snakes, when you're flying that fast, you go around the corner, you're not going to be able to stop in time.
Yeah.
And it just irritates the crud out of me when I'm, if I am road cruising or hiking out there, I just wish that people were aware and, like a 15-mile speed limit or something through the whole road. Honestly, I think the whole thing should be a preserve, all the way to the 10 freeway back to where it starts, all the way to the end. The whole thing should be a preserve, in my opinion. And that would stop field herping, but it wouldn't stop people observing them,
Yeah.
But you wouldn't be able to pick them up.
Yeah. It's I recently went herping in the Everglades, and I think we found 6 total cottonmouths, and 5 of which were dead, and 1 needed to be euthanized. So it was very depressing, like they were all freshly killed, because we were out, we were road cruising at dusk, and every single one of them was freshly killed, you know, and the one we hooked and got off the road because it was on the shoulder, whether he was warming up or crossing the road, he would have been dead within probably 10-15 minutes if he would have stayed there.
Yeah, that's the tough part. It's like that coral snake that I found in Arizona. I was like, oh, why? The one snake that I wanted to find, it was smashed.
Yeah.
Do
you
really
see
sad.
a lot of venomous when you're out and about? A lot of rattlesnakes?
Oh yeah, huge number of rattlesnakes. I would say rattlesnakes are the most common snake for me to find field herping when I'm in the desert. And depending on where we go here in the mountains, with my son and I go field herping, it was funny because my first real trip this season, all I found was baby speckled rattlesnakes, and it was a great trip, and it was fun to find them. And a week later, I took another trip with my other son, and I found one of the same snakes in the same place where he was. We find a lot of rattlers. I remove a lot of rattlers in our community. People know I like snakes, so they'll call me and say, "Hey, there's a rattlesnake in my backyard. Could you remove it?"
Oh, that's awesome.
So I'll just go out there and, catch it. And there's a canyon up here I probably wouldn't do much hiking in because it's seeded with Southern Pacific rattlesnakes. I let them all go there. It's really remote, and it's, they have a good opportunity of being safe rather than getting their head cut off there.
Yeah.
So, but
is that a big issue in your area? The only good snake is a dead snake. Is that?
Yeah, it's very common. People will either chop them with a shovel or shoot their heads off.
Yeah.
But most of the people that know me have a little respect for them and realize it's better to just have someone relocate them.
Yeah.
Because they're an important part of our ecology here, and removing one rattlesnake isn't going to really make that much difference. I always tell them that. So you know what, we're taking the snake out, but they're here. You're gonna see another one.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time. You just got to watch your step. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been here long before us, and hopefully they'll be here long after us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I didn't realize this. Talking to Ross McGibbon in Australia, I asked him. I said, "Are there snake catchers that euthanize the animals?" And he said it's illegal to kill snakes in Australia unless it's out of self-defense. and you have no other choice. Otherwise, it's illegal to do it.
Yeah. So I'm visualizing like an olive python attacking somebody on a canoe or something. Self-defense, what does that look like?
I know it's such a different concept, and I'm assuming it's probably more towards the brown snakes and, the
venomous stuff.
Yeah. The really dangerous elapids that they have over there. Potentially dangerous, I should say. But yeah, it's, I mean, and something like that too. It's like, who's enforcing it? How's it being enforced? But that's so cool that you take your family herping with you. I want to get more into that because I feel when I went herping and I went to the Everglades, I didn't have any of my family with me. And you know how it is when you're a dad, you think about your kids and then you get sad that you're not with them, and it's, so how did you get them into herping? Did you just start bringing them? What age were they when you started doing that?
Well, they grew up in a family house. We rented from my cousin, which was the house where my dad actually grew up. And we lived there for a long time. And on one side was a creek that had great habitat and, frogs. I'd take them frogging and stuff, and we'd check out the frog, the canyon tree frogs and stuff. And then on the other side was a field, big flat grassy area that had loads of rattlesnakes and horny toads and you name it. And then on the other side was more of the field, but up into the mountain area in Chaparral. So they were surrounded. 3 sides of their house was wilderness. So we'd get up, get the shoes on, grab a snake hook, and go for a walk. And we find rattlers in our yard occasionally. My son, my youngest son, Evan, he came to my wife and said, "Hey, Mom, there's a baby rattlesnake under the car." So that happened a couple times. I think they found a couple of babies, and then we had a big Southern Pacific just sitting there on our steps. Wow. And I had to relocate that thing. So they just lived in herp territory, and they learned to appreciate them, I think, because they were around captive herps, but they also got to see them in the wild and catch them in the wild. And my son, who's really most into herps, he was, oh man, how old was he? He was probably about 6 years old. And they had an outdoor swimming pool, just like a kiddie pool. They fill with water in hot summer and cool off. And he comes up to my wife and says, "Hey, Mom, check out what I caught." And he caught a racer snake. He's holding it. I'm like, "How did you catch a racer snake in the heat of the day?" Those things are like, as soon as you think about catching them, they're gone, Yeah. And he caught it, and he got lucky because it was kind of up in the shrubs, and they kind of will go climb up there and then think they're hiding, and you can sometimes reach up and grab them. Yeah. So they just grew up in it. And, my oldest son is my herping buddy for sure, but my other 2 kids go with me all the time.
That's awesome.
And my wife, she's been through it. She's had to have snakes in the bedroom before, and she gave up in our current house. She has no garage. We have an outbuilding that was, kind of an old type two garage situation. It had an apartment in the back and a bathroom. That's 100% herp facility now.
That's perfect.
Yeah, it is. And I framed in the garage doors and changed everything. Still working on it. But she's been through it a lot. But she loves herping. She loves it when you find stuff. Yeah. It's exciting, and and she loves finding boas. She knows it. And it's probably because she knows I love finding boas. But I would say she's into tortoises big time. We have a group of sulcatas in our backyard.
Oh wow!
There's a really big pen that we have for them. We've rescued a few. We rescued one from one of my students. Somebody brought one over to our house one time. They found it on the highway. I'm like, well, yeah, that's a sulcata that doesn't belong here. So got away from somebody. And so my wife just has accumulated, I think she has 3 right now.
Wow.
And she loves turtles. Her favorite two animals are pandas and turtles.
Do you guys have any pandas?
I tell you what, if we could, we would. She just loves pandas.
Are they dangerous? I don't know enough about pandas. They seem like they can't be dangerous. Like they just seem so.
Yeah, they can. They can have attitude actually.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And they're dangerous. They can be dangerous, but when they're in captivity, like they are in China, a lot of them, they look cute all the time and they're playful, and they're silly. Pandas are just silly, but man, if they get mad, the bear comes out in them.
Yeah. I saw a video the other day of the babies being born from one, and that is wild. I mean, the mom just like laid on her side and like shot a baby out.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah. They just recently got him back at the San Diego Zoo. They had him there for years, and I used to take my wife there a couple times a year to visit them. And then they went away for a while, and now they're back. So I got to take my wife down there.
Yeah.
And of course, the snakes down there. The San Diego Zoo is like probably one of the best snake places ever to go see snakes in the zoo.
What do they have that really stands out to you?
Well, they have a good survey of like Australian pythons, a lot of venomous stuff, cobras, vipers, anaconda. They even have a lot of cool lizards and local herps, and it's just it's amazing. It's been a while since I've been down there, but it's great. And of course, my wife gets sick of going to the zoo with me, and the first place I go is the snakes. She wants to go to the pandas. I want to go to the snakes.
So you're very successful with your herping here in the country. Have you done any herping outside the US? Do you plan to?
No, but I'll tell you what, Mexico is the greatest place on the planet as far as herps go.
Yeah.
I would love to do like a 2-week long herping adventure in Sonora, and maybe probably all the way. I would love to go to Tarahumara mountain boa habitat. I would love to visit Tamaulipas mountains. All of those places would be incredible.
Yeah,
that'd be fun. But at the same time, I've always wanted to go to Australia too. I've always wanted to go herping for death adders for some reason. It's something about them, because I actually, when I was a high school teacher, I had this graphing activity that they did with point plotting, and they plotted the points. It made a death adder, and they had the pattern and everything. And it was, for some reason, because of that activity they made, I've been obsessed with death adders. So I would love to find a death adder, and they look like vipers, which is cool. I mean, they're in a lapid, but they totally look like a viper.
They really do. Yeah. And they give birth to live young, right?
Yeah. So that would say, oh yeah, those are vipers, right?
Yeah. So cool. Yeah. So what I mean, Mexico's a little bit more accessible, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm not that far. I mean, I don't know what the border from me is, probably a little over 100 miles, maybe 150 miles, somewhere, something like that.
Yeah. Oh man, you got to go.
Yeah, I probably should. I'm kind of chicken though, but it's someday.
Would you get a guide?
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things I would like to do is visit the Costa Rican Amphibian Research Center. Because I do have dart frogs. I have a Monas group of dart frogs, and I love frogs.
Okay. So walk me through that. What kind of dart frogs do you have, and how do you have them set up?
Well, actually, I was going to move them. I just recently moved my office here, so it's kind of not quite set up. But eventually, they're going to be behind me.
Okay.
Right now, they're in my dining room. For years, I've had my frogs in my dining room, but it's a small group. I have 5 bumblebee dart frogs, the Locality, and I have a trio of Azuras and a pair of yellow splashbacks.
Nice.
In the past, I used to breed actually the orange splashbacks. I really miss those. I'm actually looking to get some again. But I love dart frogs. They're so amazing, and they have so much personality. At least you get the ones that are active and come out a lot. There's some dart frogs, you buy them and put them in there, Only time you see them is when you put fruit flies in there.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. I've had a lot of Ranatomea, and
mm-hmm.
it just never went well. I don't know if my house gets too hot during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be like everything would do very well, and then I would end up losing animals, and I kind of ended up just giving up on it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, I mean, during the summer, my house can get up to like 80 degrees,
That
so,
shouldn't be a problem.
well, that's the house temperature. Now I'm assuming inside the vivarium, the temperature was probably higher because of the light.
Yeah. You got to get your lighting to not produce a lot of heat.
Yeah. I don't know what I messed up, but I definitely messed up. I think I had gotten into them and then had a big issue and lost them. I was having fly cultures collapse. I had mites like crazy. I think that were in the media.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It was just like
that's annoying.
Problem after, it was like issue after issue after issue. And then I got back into them. And again, the same thing. It was like the height of the summer, and I started losing animals, and such a bummer.
Maybe, so you were doing thumbnail species, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe try something a little more common and bigger, like the Lukes. The Lukes are fantastic. They're pretty tough.
I think
they're pretty forgiving.
I probably dove into the deep end of the swimming pool a little early.
Yeah, I've had thumbnails before. I actually bred them successfully many years ago, but I don't really focus on it. It's just more of, I like watching them. And I never thought I'd culture maggots, but that's what you got to do. And making sure that you have plenty of humidity and automatic misting system, I think, is essential. I mean, misting by hand is okay, but there's going to be times where you forget or it's just not consistent enough.
Yeah.
So automatic misting, I think, is important.
Yeah, I think that's probably why I'm a better snake keeper than I am a frog keeper, because I can, you don't miss the snake there. It's not the end of the world. You go through once a week and, kind of wet them down, or just make sure the humidifier's got water in it and you're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you have? How do you maintain humidity with all your boas in your facility?
Well, the cool thing about Boa Sigma is they're not real sensitive to humidity. At least the Mexico, that'd be everybody. Everybody in Mexico is Sigma, except for the Tamaulipas are Imperator. The Costa Ricans are Imperator as well. But all my Boa Sigmas, I don't even pay a huge amount of attention to humidity.
Wow.
I probably should, but as long as there's a nice clean water dish in there, ambient humidity is usually pretty good. Now, in the summer, I do cool my facility with a swamp cooler, and I'm sure that helps a little bit.
What's a swamp cooler?
Yeah, you don't know what that is in Florida, do you?
Yeah.
No, evaporative cooling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So essentially, it's basically you have these pads and water trickles down them, and there's a big fan that blows air into your room, and it's sucking air through those pads that have water evaporating on them. And so it's just evaporative cooling essentially. And it's usually way cheaper than having an AC unit. And when you live in the West where it's pretty dry, they work fine. But man, when the monsoons come, they just don't work that well.
Really?
And that's why you won't see any in Florida,
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I'm sure that contributes to my humidity overall, but I actually don't want that for my rosies. Humidity is one of the worst things you can do for rosy boas.
Interesting.
They don't like it humid. They like it nice and dry.
Okay. So if you give them like a coconut fiber substrate, you want to make sure that it's all dried out?
Yeah, I wouldn't even use that. I would use like Sandy chips.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
like
perfect.
aspen and
Yeah, yeah, just a wood fiber. Aspen's great, or sandy chips is what I use for almost everything.
okay.
My Tarahumara's, my Tamaulipas, my Sonorans, all my Kings, all my Rosies are using sandy chips. They're easy to clean, and cost effective for sure. So I buy a
Mm.
truckload of it at a time. um, but and I
What
actually my Hog Islands are on it too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And
but
what is your like target humidity for the rosies?
you definitely want to keep it below 40%. Um,
Okay.
I think as long as you stay below 40%, you'll be fine. Probably in the 30s, high 20s is good. Um,
Wow. I don't
yeah.
think that's possible here in Florida.
Yeah, you probably have to get a dehumidifier or something, or just have a lot of lighting in your enclosure that kind of burns that humidity off.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if I don't miss my enclosures, they sit right at like 40%,
Yeah,
I would say.
yeah. So you'd be okay as long as you have like nothing producing humidity in that enclosure. Get a
Yeah.
tiny water dish, and um, I think 40% would be okay. Maybe throw in a light during the day that drops the humidity even further. You'd be all right.
Yeah.
I mean, I have clients that buy rosies from me in Florida all the time. And
Yeah.
I don't hear anything from them, so I think it's probably a good sign.
Yeah, and my son's bedroom is probably the warmest in the house, so if it ends up being his snake, that would probably work out pretty well.
Yeah.
Because it'd be a little warmer, a little drier in there, compared to the rest of the house. Huh, that's interesting. And so you said tiny water bowl too, right?
Yeah. Essentially, my rosies don't have water in their enclosures except for a couple of days out of the week.
Hmm.
And when I feed them, they absolutely lose their water privileges. I usually, when I feed them, if they have water in their water dish, I'll pour it out, make sure it's empty, and it stays empty for a few days after they feed. What rosies will sometimes do is they'll eat their food and then go take a big gulp of water, and a lot
Hmm.
of times that'll cause them to regurgitate their meal.
Really?
So essentially, when they feed, you just don't want them to drink afterwards.
So are
Uh,
you giving them like a dry frozen thawed feeder, or are you giving
yeah,
them like
yeah,
okay,
I dry them off thoroughly. Nothing wet.
that's interesting.
Yeah, that's actually quite a bit of. I have over 200 rosy boas in my collection, and so you can imagine how long I'm just drying off roses with paper towels. To like, what am I doing? Like, oh yeah, I remember I'm doing this because I don't want them to regurgitate their food.
Wow.
So
Okay, so the issue with them consuming too much water is that they'll regurg. What's the issue with them having too high relative humidity?
respiratory infection.
Really?
Yeah, it's certainly possible, and they just don't thrive in that environment.
Yeah.
It's okay short term. They're sometimes when you go out in monsoon conditions, but it's not raining where you're at, you'll find them on the move, and it draws them out. But when they're stuck in an enclosure, if it's like that constantly, it's not good for them. It's almost as bad as having like a high humidity species in a dry environment too long.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. You got to be careful with it.
And it really sounds like the perfect pet snake for a kid, right? If they kind of forget, to give them fresh water, it sounds like,
Yeah, they'll be fine. As long as they get it eventually, maybe a couple of weeks.
Are they super efficient in regards to feeding? Like how often are you feeding an adult rosy boa?
I feed my females a little heavier, especially as I move into the breeding season. But they're typically feeding once a week.
Okay.
But during the wintertime for 3.5 months, I'm not feeding them at all. So
Okay, so you totally fast them.
They totally brumate. They'll the room that they're in now. It's going to be 2 rooms because I have too many. But they're going to drop. I drop them down to essentially high 50s, low 60s, and it stays that way for about 3.5 months. I can do that because of where I live. I live in a perfect place for brumating like kings and rosy boas. because it's naturally gets cooler up here in the winter anyway.
Wow.
And, sometimes I'll have warmer days and it'll go up a little bit and it'll go up into the high 60s, but I try to keep it in the low range. And to be able to reproduce rosy boas and breed them in captivity, the males have to go through that brumation process. And you'll just have way better results if you brumate them.
So are they producing sperm during that time, that cool down?
Yes, I believe that's the case. I'd have to look that up. I'm pretty sure that that's essentially why you need to make sure you do that for the males.
Interesting.
I know it's more crucial for the males than it is the females.
Yeah.
But it's good for both of them. And I guess there's a thought that I'm sure there's some literature to support this, but there's a thought that that's where they start taking some of their body fat and converting it to muscle tone, muscle mass.
Interesting.
If they're growing up, still growing.
So they kind of fatten up throughout the year and then get more muscular during the lean time.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
Yeah. I'm not 100% sure on that. That's just what some of my mentors have told me.
Yeah.
And I kind of take it and run with it.
Now, is it mandatory to brumate an animal if you're keeping it as a pet, or no?
No. Okay. I think it's good for them overall because of the reason I just mentioned. But there's some people who keep rosies that just never brumate them. But the feeding cycle during the winter, some of the males will just refuse food anyway. So if they refuse food, you basically want to turn them down and just brumate them anyway. Because they're not going to eat anyway. So you don't want them to be not feeding and be in a warm environment for an extended period of time because they'll start to lose body mass. So they need that cool down period and just to be fairly inactive. Doesn't mean you can't pick them up every once in a while. I do kind of, with my brumating boas, I kind of leave them alone as much as I can, but every once in a while I just need to grab one.
Yeah.
I just can't resist. But it's better for them to have that. I mean, in captivity, I know there's people that get away with not brumating them, but sometimes they will give you a choice.
Yeah.
So,
and what about the Boa Sigma? Do you do the same thing, the same fasting period?
Well, they are seasonal breeders, but the males are the ones that will go off feed. What happens is once my room is cooled down from my rosies and my kings, the whole facility is cooler. And just the natural wintertime rain that we get here, that's when they start breeding them. If it rains, I'm throwing males in with my females. So something about the higher humidity and the rain, it's just a great time to breed boas, the Boa Sigma.
Okay.
And I drop their temperatures a little bit, but not much. Ambient temperature drops quite a bit, but their heat, I only drop it about 3 or 4 degrees.
Okay.
The males will usually quit eating for a couple months, sometimes 3 months.
Oh, wow.
But the females will usually, not always, but they'll usually stay on feed during that time. Once they ovulate and they're gravid, most of them will refuse food.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll feed them I'll feed them like an adult mouse occasionally while they're gravid, if they'll take it. Only early on, So
is that like a small meal for them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you normally feeding them?
I feed my females medium rats about every 3 weeks or so, and then my males small rats about the same thing every 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
But a real not like I guess you say rodent pro size small rat.
Okay. Yeah. Is that your preferred feeder?
That's the only place I can afford to buy feeders from.
Yeah.
Because I need so many. It's just, and they've done me well over the years. And I had a real bad situation where my freezer went out on me and I had thousands of rodents in there and it was horrible. And they helped me replace them and they gave me like a dirt cheap price to replace them. They were very helpful, very nice. So they've definitely never done me wrong over the years. And their prices are really competitive. So for me, having so many boas, I have to buy my food there. I can't afford to buy it anywhere else.
Yeah, I had an order from them once show up, and I don't know what happened with FedEx or what, but a lot of the feeders were like broken in half and decapitated and shattered,
Oh, wow.
because
Yeah.
they were just so cold, and I guess the box must have been jostled around or something, and I kind of let them know. I said, hey, it's like probably 25 to 50% of this order, and I sent the pictures and everything, and they immediately sent me a replacement order.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, it's I immediately went and wrote them a good review on Google. I was like, I mean, it wasn't, I didn't even ask. They just did it. They were like, we're going to send you a replacement order, which is awesome. It's hard to find that.
Yeah. And it's, for us, it's super important. I mean, if we lose that source of food, we're in trouble. And I can't breed rodents. My family's too sensitive to breeding. My son breaks out really bad. And we go visit my mentor, and he'd be over there, just his eyes are red, and tears are coming out of his eyes, and he's asking him herp questions, and like suffering through this, I'm like, okay, we need to go get some Benadryl real quick here.
Oh no, that poor guy. See, so you couldn't get a pet panda.
Well, yeah. I think my wife would just say, you know what, I'm getting a pet panda, you need to move out or something.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they're hypoallergenic,
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. All right, man. Well, we'll wrap it up. Is there anything in your collection that you don't have that you'd like to get? Any specific species or anything?
Yes. Cancun boas.
Cancun boas.
Full-blooded Cancun boas, the real thing.
Are they available or no?
Yeah. Vin has them every once in a while. Every time he offers them up, I'm always broke. But if the opportunity presents itself, I would love to get some Cancun boas. And then I need to get some more crawls. I have a pair of crawl key boas. They're basically replacing my cockers I used to work with. This time I decided to go with the crawl location, or the crawl island.
What's the difference between those two? Like, why are you drawn to one over the other?
You mean the crawls versus the cockers?
Yeah.
There's not much difference between them. They both sort of look anathoristic naturally. I would say they both have a lot of speckling in their pattern. They're very similar. They're both a key off of the coast of Belize on one of those tiny, ridiculously tiny islands again. So I'm sure they're very genetically very similar, but they're isolated enough to look slightly different. But they're basically kind of a grayscale color with blacks and whites, and they're really neat.
You said the other one was Cancun?
Yeah, the Cancun boas, just from Mexico.
And what draws you to them? Why do you want them?
Well, they're very similar to the Tarahumaras, but they're more like the Sonorans. They're from more climates. They're probably slightly bigger, like the Sonorans are. But it just, nobody has them anymore, and they've been outcrossed. I had a Cancun in my old collection many years ago that I got from my mentor, and I really miss it. So I'm just kind of looking for it in the future.
Just waiting on Vin to pop some out.
Yeah, and hopefully when he puts them up for sale, I'll have money.
So how many of the dwarf boas do you have? I
don't know. Let's see. Well, technically, my Tarahumaras are only ones that actually are considered dwarfs. I don't know if my crawls are considered dwarfs.
Well, I guess let me rephrase that. So you have 200 rosies, which is wild. Or and then how many of the
roughly 200? It's probably more, but I have a lot of weird localities and some new morphs I'm raising up. So
yeah,
but let's see. I have quite a few Sonorans. I would say it's probably in the high 20s, like 24, 25,
oh, okay,
somewhere around there.
That's more reasonable.
Yeah, well, they take a lot more space.
Yeah.
I don't think I can get away with having 200 of those.
Yeah. So about half that number is the Tarahimaras, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any big species you'd consider adding, or do you like the smaller?
As far
body?
as breeding goes, no. I like what I'm doing. I'll do this for the rest of my time on this planet. But
yeah,
I really would love to have a diamond python or a Boulin's python or something like that. But that would be like more of a pet kind of thing. Would be cool.
Yeah.
So
I just picked up a diamond python yesterday.
Nice.
A new one. It's I have 2 females and I just got the male, and yeah, I'm keeping them all outside. I plan on doing it year round.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm excited.
Yeah, you're going to be challenged to get them to breed out there, but because they need to cold.
Well, so we get down to the 40s at night during the winter, and we are about the same distance from the equator in the northern hemisphere as Australia is in the southern hemisphere, where they occur in like New South Wales, Queensland area. We're almost the same distance.
Yeah.
So our winter and our hot season is very, very similar. So I'm hoping that, it'll work out and it'll be a successful endeavor.
Yeah. Well, even if you don't, just having them is awesome. I mean, I think it's just, just amazing animals.
And keeping snakes outside is exceptional. It's it's so cool. It's so cool watching them.
You have to do that with the blackheads too, right? To successfully breed them. They have to be in an outdoor pen or something.
So I had Derek Roddy on. He has a ton of them. I know that he takes some of his outside, but he doesn't like leave them out there. I think he just like gives them a duration during the day to go outside and get some UV and do snake stuff.
Yeah.
But all right, man. Well, thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate your time. It was great talking with you, and yeah, man, I'm excited about a rosy boa one day.
Yeah, it's my thing. Although this year is going to be really slow. I'm only going to produce 9 litters this year. It's going to be weird. It's like this year is going to be about 9. Next year I'll be in the 20s. The following year is going to be ridiculous. That's just the way it's going to go, I think.
All right, man. Have a good weekend.
All righty. Thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it.